Good morning, good evening, good something, wherever you are, guys and girls. We are going to start today's meetup. And as I mentioned before, in today's meetup, we are going to discuss how to properly prioritize your AppSec. We will start with Tanya Janca. She will share with us how to future-proof our application security strategy. As I mentioned before, Tanya is a celeb in our industry, so it should definitely be amazing. Later on, Gadi Bashvitz, and we'll speak and introduce each and every one of them later on in length. He will share with us the significant ROI of shifting to the left the AppSec testing plan or program. Josh Grossman will share with us teach us how to tune our toolbox, how to better use our AppSec. Sorry, I have a bug annoying me here. How to better use our AppSec scanners. And Naore Azenkut will share with us a case study that they had about application security cost effectiveness. Tanya, are you ready?
I am, absolutely. Are you going to give me...
Yeah, so excellent. 1 second before you start, just to get people to know you a bit better. So Tanya Janca, if you are not familiar with, she is also known as the Pipl. Maybe you heard that name instead. Is the best-selling author of Alice and Bob Learn Application Security. If you haven't booked it on Amazon, you should. She is also the founder of Pipl, an online learning academy, community, podcast, and training company that revolves around teaching everyone to create secure software. Tanya has been coding and working in IT for over 25 years, won countless awards, and has been anywhere and everywhere from public services to tech giants, writing software, leading communities, founding companies, and securing all the things. She is an award-winning public speaker, active blogger, and podcaster, and has delivered hundreds of talks on 6 continents. 6 continents, that's mind-blowing.
Thank you, Gidi. Thank you for having me, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. And I want to talk about basically how can we make sure our application security strategies age well and continue to do all the things we need them to do so that our apps continue to be secure against all the threats that continue to happen to us. And so we called it future-proofing your AppSec strategy, but I mean, try to think of it as a really good strategy that of course you'll have to probably adjust like a little bit from time to time and from different organizational perspectives, but I feel like for what we're doing, this is gonna be good. Okay, so I'm pressing the button. I'm waiting, let's see. There we go. Okay, awesome. So where are we gonna talk about today? I wanna talk about the importance of application security, current challenges, and some trends that we're seeing. So some of the things will be like increasing, so there's more cyber attacks. You wouldn't be at this meetup if you didn't know that there were several things happening in the space. How our attack surface is growing. So that might be news for some of you. Adoption of DevSecOps. I'm sure all of you have heard of it, but some of us have more experience than others. Automation and artificial intelligence. Then we're going to go to the third part of the presentation where we're going to talk about creating a proactive strategy. So planning a strategy and its execution, risk assessment, automation and remediation, DevSecOps processes, and then continuous education and training. Okay, so pressing the button, let's see how we do here. Tempted to press it again, but I've been told not to press it multiple times. There we go, awesome. Okay, so about me. So Gidi already told you all about me, but I feel like one of the key takeaways here is that I'm really passionate about this space, about trying to help people make more secure software, and I'm a great big nerd. And also, if I brush my hair, I look nice. That's also an important takeaway on this slide. It's funny, when we practiced using the button earlier, it took under a second, and now it's taking a few seconds.
Tanya, I think that you need to click on once on the screen or something like this to be focused, and then maybe then it will work. But let's get it right in next slide. I'm here either way.
Okay, thank you. So the importance of application security. I feel like this is one you wouldn't be at this meetup if you didn't feel that it was a thing. Click and rate on the screen. Okay, so application security is every action you take towards ensuring that the security of your software is assured. So this could mean testing that it's secure. This could mean doing training so that you know that people are making less mistakes in the first place. This could mean you listening to a podcast or attending something like this, and then hearing something and thinking, you know what, I should go check that. So sometimes we're very formal in the way that we perform application security. We create an official, legitimate program where you work. We have a secure system development lifecycle that everyone follows each time they build software. But it doesn't have to be formal for it to still be you helping us fight the good fight. So since it switched to the next slide for me, insecure software, you might be aware it's the #1 cause of data breach. So I started reading the Verizon Breach Report in 2015, and every single year we're #1 cause. I want to not be the #1 cause. I'd like to not be #2 or even #3. I'd like to go down this list, but every year we win this terrible prize, I guess, of being the biggest cause. And over the years, it's changed exactly what percentage of breaches we cause, but it's been anywhere from like 27% up to even about 40% of the breaches that insecure software was the direct cause of. And that is really disappointing from a person who's been working in this space and trying to help make apps more secure. There we go, yes. Okay, so let's talk about some current trends within application security as a field and some of the things we've been seeing. So the DevSecOps market is growing in size and importance. And the reason we decided to show this slide to you is that we want to explain that basically people aren't going to be buying all of these products if they're not using them, if they don't think it's important. And there aren't more and more people all the time who've decided to switch from older software development methods to newer software development methodologies and ways of working. And quite frankly, how they manage the culture within their software development organization. So another thing is that not only automation, but artificial intelligence is being used to streamline processes. So whether it be scanning or patching or reducing the risk of human error, like, hey, this person did these 3 things and those 3 things together, that's pretty weird. All of those things are things that automation and or artificial intelligence can help us catch sooner and faster. And so I'm not trying to sell you AI, just to be clear, although I do have a friend who told me last night he got ChatGPT to create a brand new course for him about ChatGPT. And I was like, that's very meta. Yeah, okay. I've been pressing the button right when the slide gets for the next slide. Let's see if
I'm trying to support.
Pardon?
I'm trying to support it and then run to it again if needed.
Thank you. So there's also an increased adoption of cloud and mobile technologies. So like lots of people have been visiting websites on their phones forever, but people are installing more like native or hybrid mobile apps. Lots of us are all using cloud services. Even we hack Purple, we're teeny tiny, and we use the cloud. And so we have to secure these things. And if our apps are living in the cloud, there's slightly different things that we're going to need to do. There we go. So, oh, perfect. Okay, so let's talk about some challenges. No, that's great. No, go to the next slide. Can I just ask you to click to the next slide? Because it's been like
no problem.
Thank you.
Here you go.
Okay, so adopting cloud security has increased the cyber attack surface, but not in like the ways we might think. It's not that we've intentionally been increasing it. It's just that not everyone's doing a perfect implementation. Not everyone has designed things in the same way. And because things are in the cloud, people can crawl across, like malicious people can crawl across like giant domain stretches and trying to find more than they normally would. So previously, we didn't have to access this stuff over the internet. We could just have an intranet. And if we had our own network, we didn't even have to go onto the internet. So we've increased our attack surface in some ways. Next slide, please. Cybercrime is on the rise. I'm sure you all know this. So in 2020, the cost of cybercrime was 6 trillion, and that was 1% of the entire world's GDP, so the gross domestic product. So basically 1 penny out of every dollar that you have and that every person on the planet has was stolen in 2020. And 2023, we're estimating it to be 8 trillion, which is absolutely outstandingly terrible. I don't like this stat. I really would prefer a nicer stat, but it's getting worse instead of better. Can we go next? Thank you. And cybercrime increased by almost 40% last year. Next slide. I feel like these are the sad slides. I want to get to the happier slides. There we go. So let's talk about being more proactive. Let's talk about figuring out ways that we can have less of this. So we need to create a comprehensive strategy. And by that, I mean, we need to be able to cover more things. I'm not going to tell you every single thing in OWASP's ASVS, the Application Security Verification Standard, because then we would be here for an entire day, actually maybe more. But I'm going to try to go over some things that I feel are a really good place to start, and a way to get like more of a broad look at things. And so first of all, we want to talk about vulnerability assessments, penetration testing, secure coding practices, and incident response plans. So like ideally we would have all of these. I was going to say like a few, but I'd really like to see all of them. So vulnerability assessments can just be a bunch of automated scans, right? And you can use a dynamic scanner, you can use a stack analysis scanner, you can use a software composition analysis scanner. I would love it if you used all three, to be honest, so you could get a really good look at things. It's an automated approach, so you can go quite fast and you can scale it and you can even automate it so that you have a picture of what's going on. A penetration test is manual. You need to hire an expert. It takes time. But if you have certain applications that are extremely important, pen testing those makes great sense. So you can ensure that, like your company's most important assets are the absolute safest they can be. Secure coding practices. So quite often I hear companies saying, well, they should just be doing it. And it's not like it's a button they're not pressing. You have to learn how to do this. And it takes time and it takes practice. You want to give guidance, you want to check these things, tell people when they've made a mistake so they can learn not to do it again. These are things that we build into the culture of our organization over time with training, social reinforcement, automated reinforcement whenever possible. And we want to make sure that we can respond when there's a security incident, especially if it's a software incident, because quite often IR teams or incident response teams, they're really, really good at malware, like ransomware, all the common things that you see, like, oh, there's a virus attached to this email, let's obliterate it. But not as good when it comes to custom software. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so, we're gonna dig into these a little bit more. Okay, so for a risk assessment, I like to start with inventory. Right now, it is the hot thing in the United States to build an SBOM, a software bill of materials. I prefer to be more in depth than that. So not just these are the 4 libraries I have in this app, but I like to know what libraries those libraries call, etc., and know if there's known vulnerabilities inside of them. So that would be software composition analysis, which would be a step even above an SBOM. Threat modeling, which I have a feeling Josh might talk about in a few minutes, one of our other guests. He's really good at it. Threat modeling is the idea of talking about the potential threats that can relate to your system and then doing something about them. Just to be clear, threat modeling is not talking about it and then doing nothing, which I've seen at 1 or 2 orgs. And then step 4 of a risk assessment, like if we're just doing the basics, we're starting at the beginning, would be to find vulnerabilities. So we could use automated tools. We could have a manual person come in and do manual pen testing. but that's a security expert. So it costs more, it takes more time, but it's way more thorough. Okay, so then automation and remediation. So ideally, if we can, we want all of these automated tools feeding into some sort of vulnerability assessment tool. So right now they're called ASOC, Application Security Orchestration something, but basically an Excel spreadsheet would be fine. We just want to see like everything that's going on the best we can. And sometimes Excel is what you have to work with, so start with that. And then you can move on to having a fancier dashboard built for this later when you have more budget or more time. But what you want to see is see if you can find metrics, see if you can find trends. Is everyone making the same mistake over and over again? Like, is one tool finding lots and another tool is not finding the same things, etc. And whenever we can, we automate as much of this data collection as possible, because doing it manually, first of all, is really boring. You have more important work to do. But second of all, then there's human error involved, and I make errors just like the rest of us. Okay, so DevSecOps processes. So ideally, we want to have security requirements that we're giving all teams. You're building a serverless app, awesome. Here's some security requirements I'd like you to have. And then as they're doing all their stuff, they know what we need. So they're not sitting there trying to ask the security team in a rush. We're just like, here's the technology you're using, here's the guidance we have for you. Yeah, security architecture design is not on the list. I agree. This is not a thorough list. This is a starter list. But that's a good point. I also would want to do that. I'd want to do a review of the architecture from a security perspective. And as I put it, ask 100 questions, because I always have a ton of questions. So then we want to set agreed upon rules for governance and remediation. So ideally, if software developers are able to take control of some of these tools, we've automated some of them for them, and they can see the results as early as possible and as fast as possible. And we want to give them accurate information whenever possible, so that they, first of all, so we're not wasting their time. Like, we are not going to make friends and influence people if we're delivering a lot of false positives. And I have a feeling Gadi will talk about that later, and how we can reduce that. But we really want to deliver the news and make the news accurate about what's going on with their app from a security perspective as fast as we can. And then the last thing on this list is making sure the developers know all the things they need to know to do a good job. And some of this can be done with the security champions program. So identifying certain people on each teams that are extra security aware and extra amazing, who are interested in being part of such a program. This can mean establishing a training program internally to your organization. I realize that I am extremely biased because I own a training company, but internal training really matters as well, like teaching them what you expect from them, what you need from them, showing them where all the documentation is that they need, telling them about the processes you work with. That's something only you can do, and that's very, very important as well. And then ideally embed incentives throughout the SDLC to get them to do a better job. That depends on the organization you're working for, but definitely whatever you can do to encourage them to go along with this will be very helpful. Could we please go to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, oh my gosh, I didn't realize we're going to dig into each one of these. I know I've seen these slides before, just to be clear, but it's hard when you can't see the slides that are coming. Okay, so I like to start with inventory, because if we don't know about something, we can't protect it. I like over and over and over again, I have this discussion. People are like, we bought a new tool. What do we do first? I'm like, scan the apps you know about and start discovering all the apps you don't know about yet. And the ones that you have not been aware of are usually going to be not as tough and robust and secure as all the other apps that you already did know about, that you already had scanned, that you'd already threat modeled, that you'd already looked at the architecture. Taking a proper inventory can help you reduce the chance of having a security incident of any kind, including a data breach, which is the worst kind. In my opinion, it's pretty much on the top of my list of things I don't want to have happen to me or any of the companies I work with. And so let's go to the next slide. Okay, perfect. So a software bill of materials is like a list of ingredients. That's it. Like it's just a list of ingredients that are for your app. So it's all the third-party components, the libraries, the plugins, the framework, everything that is code that is part of your app, but that you did not write. That's part of your software bill of materials. And it's helpful to know what's inside, but I like to know what those libraries call as well. Those are called transitive dependencies. So you might have 8 different libraries, but they might call 12 more libraries, and they might call 24 more libraries, and all of that is potential risk for your org. And then ideally, I like to perform something called software composition analysis. So there's automated tools for this. Doing this manually really just doesn't make sense anymore in today's current climate. And so then you can find out if there's known vulnerabilities in any of those libraries that are part of your application. Next slide, please. Threat modeling. So again, I suspect Josh is speaking about this later. I haven't seen his presentation, just to be clear. But so the purpose of threat modeling is to assess the possible threats to your system, do your best to mitigate them. And if that's not possible, either do something to make the risk lower, like less intense, so maybe a secondary type of mitigation, and or manage the risk. And by that, I mean watch for it, document that that is a potential risk and why you decided to accept this risk and not mitigate it. So I have the lists for threat modeling, but I think we should go to the next slide and look at step 4. Finding vulnerabilities. So security testing should be conducted on a regular basis, ideally as part of your system development lifecycle, and ideally as early as possible and as often as possible. And by as often as possible, I don't mean that you should have a pen tester and all they do is pen test the same thing over and over and over again. I mean automation whenever possible. If we can show this, that our applications are quite secure and that we work quite hard on this can be a selling feature now. The public and especially other IT companies are much more aware of the risks to things and have started asking about it for the first time, like just recently. And this is really exciting for me as a giant AppSec nerd. Next slide, please. Okay, so ideally we want to automate and remediate. And by this, we mean we want to help reduce the time required in order to go through these things. And Forrester, Gartner, and all of the people that have big opinions on things, all of them agree that whatever we can automate safely has huge return on investment. And the time that we take to set up that automation is always paid back. Next slide, please. With DevSecOps processes, essentially, so DevOps is a way to build software. It's a newer, more modern way. And it's also a cultural change for a lot of software development shops in the way they work, where they prioritize learning, they prioritize being efficient for the entire system, they prioritize giving constant feedback to everyone about everything that they can so that all of us can do better. DevSecOps is what us security folks do as part of that, how we try to work within their amazing processes and we try to weave security into what they are doing as efficiently as we can. And so whether you want to see the stats or not, but basically we want to add security testing, security assessments, security verification, whatever you want to call it, throughout the SDLC and as often as possible. Next slide, please. Again, I'm really biased because I own a company, but training and education can help you not have these problems in the first place. A lot of people are like, why are the developers writing insecure code? And I try to explain to them because that's what they're literally teaching them to write in university, in college, in these boot camps. They're literally teaching them how to do it wrong. It's not that the software developers don't care. It's that they were taught to do it a certain way, and that way builds security problems into each app. From the very first lesson of Hello World, they're teaching them how to build cross-site scripting right into their first application as a vulnerability. And so if you expect your developers to write secure code, you're going to need to teach them how. Some of them will already know, some of them will know some of it. You might be lucky and have a handful that know pretty much all of it, but you're going to have way, way more that don't know. And so there's lots of amazing free training on the internet. There's paid training. There's many options, but you setting aside time for them to do this and prioritizing it is a good investment. Even if you don't hire my company, just to be clear, this is a really good investment of your security dollars, making sure they don't build the vulnerability in the first place. That is the absolute earliest you can get in the SDLC. Next slide, please. Oh, good, I'm on time, yes. I was so worried. Does anyone have any questions? I know that I went like a bit fast towards the end because I was trying to be exactly on time. I want to be respectful of all the other speakers, so all of them get their full amount of time. But do people have any questions? That was a lot of information we just went through.
Yes, so we've got a couple of questions.
Oh, wonderful.
Let me start with the first one. What are some best practices for communicating the importance of proactive application security to senior management and other stakeholders? Basically, how do you take it from developers to not developers?
I usually try to talk to senior management about my concerns as a security nerd as often as possible. I try to walk that line between being extremely informative and helpful and being annoying, which is a hard line sometimes because these people can be really, really busy with lots of other, like I'm not their only priority. I try to, as much as possible, communicate in their language rather than in my language. Like I'm not going to say, oh, it's a CVE of 10, so get on it, boy. I'm gonna explain. So this is an extraordinarily high risk. It's 10 on 10, which is the highest possible level we can get. This is how it could potentially affect our customers. This is how it could potentially affect our data and our systems. And or this is how it could affect our actual employees, which is a risk that sometimes people don't talk about. But to me, a risk to my actual employees goes way to the top. If it's going to harm the people I work with every day, like this is, sometimes companies, they forget that those matter to us too. And so when you speak their language, if you try to frame it exactly how it could affect the business and the people involved with the business, and the data, I find that you can get your message across much more clearly. Also, if you can speak at the all staff and don't just do doom and gloom, talk about, hey everyone, I have an update from the security team. Like we've implemented these 2 new tools. And as a result, we found these things. We are now, like we've crushed this many bugs and we've done this and this, and we've improved our security posture in these ways. I am still counting on all of you to report security situations to me as you see them, like you're our eyes and ears or whatever else you want to say to them. But as often as possible, try not to just be that doom and gloom person where you only have bad things to report. I think it's important as well to communicate positive things so that they actually are happy to see you sometimes. Absolutely. I hope that helps.
Or you can find yourself in an organization where you have a CISO and then you can throw everything on the Chief Information Security Officer. They will speak with senior management.
Yeah, make the CISO.
But definitely, yeah. Next question is, what metrics and guidelines should be considered when looking at remediation?
Oh, that's such a good question. So I try to have server risk level for each app. And so like, let's say something's public facing rather than internal facing, it would pose more risk. If there's sensitive information in it versus no sensitive information, more risk. If it's mission critical to your company, etc. All of these things are higher risk. And so as a result, then I would give more cadence to the vulnerabilities within those systems that pose higher risk to our org. And then within those results, you can apply that based on your business model. So as an example, so I used to work at Elections Canada. They have different threats than my little tiny company I have now. We hack Pipl. Like no one's trying to destroy democracy by attacking We Hack Pipl. They're just trying to steal intellectual property. That's the only thing. Like we don't even really have very much money that it would be like at a time that it would be worth stealing from us versus trying to destroy the democracy of Canada as a whole. Different threats. And so then when you look at your apps, you should assess those vulnerabilities based on your mission. And so sometimes a security header could go from being a low to a high because you need to protect against a specific threat that's very important, only because of the weird way that you run an election or perform counterterrorism activities or protect your intellectual property. And so I know that that's not the answer you want, that it's just going to be like, do 10s first, then do 9s next. But that doesn't always necessarily make sense. I've seen a 10, so I had SQL injection once in an app, but the app was public facing. All of the data in it was actually data we tried really hard to get Canadians to read. It was in its own little subnet, like we'd had a zero trust thing. We'd recently patched the server. The user had very low access, like it could just do select. It wasn't CRUD on the database. And so yes, there was SQL injection. Yes, we needed to fix it. However, I was like, we can fix it tomorrow morning. We don't need to stay up all night and fix it right now, because what are they going to do? Steal a bunch of data we wish Canadians would read?
So that's like another thing. Maybe you should, sometimes you need to pray for it to be breached and leaked.
I never thought I would pray for a data breach before. You're opening my mind.
I mean, special needs or special measures when you need them. The next question refers to the security testing that you mentioned before. So what if your developers are resistant to performing security testing early on? How do you communicate the importance of security testing, especially early on stage security testing?
I feel like there's a bunch of different ways you could do this. So if the developers are resistant, I try to figure out why. So sometimes they're resistant because the tool they've been dealing with has just sucked. And there's like certain types of tools that I've seen this happen over and over again. And I don't want to make fun of any specific companies, and none of them are on this call, just to be clear, but like where it's like not rolled out really nicely. And so then it's more difficult for the developers, or like the way it's being used, like, oh, it's just going to run 2 hours in your CI/CD. And they're like, why are you making our CI/CD take 10 times longer than it used to? Right. And so sometimes it's the way the testing's being performed or the way the tool's been implemented rather than the tool itself. Sometimes there are certain tools that are just not made to be used in certain ways. They're not optimized for that. Right. So sometimes, like, so I always want to know why it's resistant. And sometimes it's a thing I can just fix for them. I can swap out the tool. I can deploy it in a different way. I'm like, maybe it shouldn't be in the CI/CD. Maybe I should run it overnight and email them the next morning. Maybe I could run it earlier, like when they check their code in. So I try to figure out like, where's the resistance coming from? Can I solve it? But sometimes it's just like, I have 10,000 other things my boss told me to do. I already work late every night. Adding another thing on top of that, I'm going to look for a new job. That's another issue altogether. And usually then I try to talk to the managers of these devs and talk about like, how can we make this one of their priorities? How can we fit this into their already way too full workload? So if you can figure out why the things are not working, why they're resistant, you can try to solve those things. And sometimes it's just culturally, like, I don't know how to do that. I'm worried I'll be bad at it. Like I guess it depends on the reasons why they're resistant. And maybe every team has a different reason, and maybe you're going to have to do a lot of work to try to get them on board. One thing that has worked really well for me is doing public speaking and like showing them the problems we're having, showing them how to use the tool and asking who's interested, and then mentoring them more and spending more time with those ones. And then eventually, hopefully creating champions of security on each team. And then I usually just work with those developers that are more interested. Public speaking, I know you're like, oh, she does it all the time. She's really good at it. But just to be clear, I sucked when I started. I was so nervous. I'm like, I'm going to die. I was very, very, very intimidated and very nervous about it. And so if you feel that way, you can get better at it over time. You can become less nervous or not nervous at all eventually. And actually, in my case, I'm lucky. I really love it now, especially Q&A. That's my favorite part.
Maybe I'll chime in. Gidi, maybe I'll chime in. I'll preempt one of my slides later, talking about how you get developers to chime in, or to lean in earlier. One of the things that we've seen that's very, very helpful is showing them the return on their time. There's a very well-known research that shows that if you remediate a vulnerability at the earliest stages of development, say as they're going through the IDE or unit testing, it will take a 60th of the time than fixing it later if it's in production. Which means if I'm a developer, I can invest an hour now early on, or I can invest a week and a half later. And if you're able to do the analysis of how much time are they actually spending remediating vulnerabilities in production, and show them how much time they can actually spend to be much more effective and efficient if they do it early, and you are actually freeing up time for them instead of being an onus on them. And that's a critical thing that we've seen that's very, very helpful. Happy to share more on that.
Yeah,
Nice.
I have a few more questions, so let's take one of them now, and later on maybe we'll share them with you, so you'll be able to respond via a short video or something like this. So, what is your opinion on business leaders not understanding the importance of security and not seeing it as an added value?
Okay, so my opinion of people that don't see it as important and as a priority, you're going to need to educate them. They're like it, because it seems very obvious to me, and I'm sure everyone on this call, that like now more than ever before, like we have continued threats, we have more attacks than ever before, etc. So they're probably not informed. They're probably unaware, and so you probably need to share some data with them. Like I remember explaining to a dev team like just how many attacks that we had, and their brains just like they're whoa, and you defend against those. I'm like, it's not like I have like a sword and a shield and I'm running around our office, right? Our systems, like your apps are good, but I want them to be great. And so if you can explain to them like specific things that happen to your business, how many times you're attacked, how many things you've managed to ward off versus how many you have not, I feel like you can usually get buy-in. Explaining that it's a return on investment, like Gadi said about numbers. Oh, so I remember someone saying C-level executives really like pictures. It's not that they like pictures. It's that they like to receive data in an effective way that they can very easily interpret it quickly. And so whenever you can share data with them and it's reasonable to do so, I think we should report up whenever possible. And that would be more likely to get them on board. And if it still doesn't get them on board, you might need to talk to the other leaders where you work and discuss like this, I feel this person's putting us at risk, like you yourself. In last case, I have had people sign off on risk. So if they won't give me any authority to fix absolutely anything, I make them sign in writing that they've been briefed, they are aware of these things, and they've decided to do nothing. And so far, no one's ever signed it because they're like, this is terrible. Why would I allow this? I'm like, by not giving me the authority to fix these things, by not telling your staff they must do these things, you have accepted this risk, whether you sign the paper or not. You are responsible for this continuing to exist. And you don't make friends having that discussion, but you get things done.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for those. Again, there are a few more questions, but we need to move on with the plan. Stick to the plan. So Tanya, thank you very, very much. On the screen right now, you can all see ways to communicate with Tanya, ask more questions. Those questions you already shared with us, we will share with Tanya later on, and we'll find a way to provide the answers from Tanya, maybe with the recording or maybe on our Meetup or LinkedIn pages. So stay tuned with those.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Tanya, and have an amazing day.
Thank you, you too.